Welcome to the Nugget Hunter. My name is Kevin.
And I'm Pace. And today we are talking to Dad all about the rise and the fall and what his journey from entrepreneurship has looked like, what from suicide, from being positive to negative to back to positive, what all that looked like, and how you have brought yourself back up from that negative mindset. So can you first tell us, where did your entrepreneurial journey start? What did it look like? And what's your background on that front?
Well, I would probably say entrepreneur journey started when I was a kid. During the summers, we had to work. If I wasn't, well, during the summers I had to work anyways. If I wasn't playing sports in school, I had to work during the work week, the school week as well. But every summer I would have to work for my dad on the farm. And it basically sun up to sundown. My dad back in the day, log splitters would only split 32-inch wood, and my dad's fireplace needed 36-inch wood. So from sun up to sundown, every day during the summer, I would be with a sledgehammer and a wedge splitting firewood, big hunks of trees that we would cut up that had fallen over on the farm, stand up and split those into firewood, stack them up on the trailer, get them back to the house, stack them up. So, and back in the day, it was minimum wage. I don't know, $5 an hour or something like that.
He was probably paying you.
Huh?
He was paying you minimum wage, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
absolutely. So the next summer comes, and I did not want to have to work for my dad on the farm. And I had a couple buddies, Shelton Murdoch and Trey Haynes. We decided to go in business together and do a lawn care business. So we borrowed some money from Dad to buy a lawnmower and the equipment we needed, and we started going around trying to drum up a business for a lawn care business. So that was probably my first taste of entrepreneurship. But then fast forward, Dad was a Toyota dealer, and then when he sold his Toyota dealership, he really dove into, I guess before he even sold it, but during the process of that time period, he was a developer, and he got into developing neighborhoods and strip malls and things of that nature. And he also owned some apartment complexes. I saw that, and I kind of knew what that was a little bit. But so when I was 20, I had saved up some money over the time, and I ended up building my first duplex. So I lived in one side and rented the other side out. I just always knew that I wanted real estate to be a part of my investment portfolio. So I did that at 20. I didn't know what I was going to be doing in life because Dad had sold the Toyota dealership. He had told me, look, if I wanted to own my own new car dealership, both my uncles are also in the Toyota business. My whole family background is...
Can you tell us a little bit about how your family got into the car business? Because I think that's a really cool story.
Yeah, it's a cool story. So the story is that my grandfather, his father had a used car dealership back around the Great Depression time. And what the used car dealership back then was a mechanic shop. So he had a mechanic shop, but people would drop their cars off to get fixed and then couldn't afford the repair or whatnot. So he would buy it off of them. He would end up fixing it, and then he would end up selling it. And that's kind of how we got into in the car sales. Well, during the Great Depression, when that came, my grandfather, I think, was 13 to 15, somewhere right in that range. And he was tasked with going out trying to sell tools and equipment and all of that type stuff in the streets to try to drum up the cash for them to be able to survive. Now, this is the story I've heard. I'm not saying it's 100% factual, but this is how I recollect it, in case any of my family members see this and they're like, that ain't 100%, But anyway, so my grandfather's father, was remarried and had a couple kids of his own, or she had a couple kids of her own. And one day when my grandfather came home from trying to sell the tools and equipment, he got home and there was a note on the door that they had moved. So at the range of 13 to 15, my grandfather was on his own. So fast forward, he hitchhikes to Florida.
From New York.
From Bath, New York. He hitchhikes to Florida. Along the way, he became I think a door-to-door vacuum clean salesman or something like that.
So it took him a minute to get down to Florida.
Oh yeah, it took him a
Yeah.
while. It took him a while, and but back then you'd hitchhike and people would get you there. And what happened is the economy was so bad up in New York, but there was a boom going on in Florida, even though it was still during the Great Depression. There was things happening down there, so a lot of people was getting down that way. So he got rides along the way for sure, but somehow along the way he ended up being a door-to-door salesman for like a vacuum cleaner company or something, and he was in Florida at the time. My grandfather spoke like Elmer Fudd. If y'all don't know who Elmer Fudd is, look him up. He was a cartoon character, but he had a speech impediment. And so, but he came across this lady that absolutely fell in love with him, and she ended up getting him a job at her husband's, I think, Plymouth dealership. And the story goes that my grandfather ended up buying this guy out over some years of working there. He ended up buying him out, and he had, a used car dealership plus a Plymouth dealership or something like that. And then fast forward, I don't remember the fellow's name, but there was a guy that had the market on Toyota. When Toyota was going to start shipping over to the United States, he had the territory. And my grandfather knew him very well. They lived down in, I don't know if it's Gainesville, but it was somewhere. I was born in Gainesville, but I'm not sure if that's where Papa was stationed at the time. But this guy comes through. He offers the Toyota franchise to my granddad, and this was, I think, in the 70s. And Papa said no. I don't want Jap cars. Them little old cars, no good. All this stuff, and he didn't want anything to do with them. So the guy ends up going to his competitor and offers it to him. Supposedly the competitor said, "Hey, I'm going to take you up on that deal." Well, in the meantime, my dad and my two uncles were working for my grandfather, and they both were like, "Hey, we need this, these Toyotas. These are gas burners. These big old Plymouths and stuff are huge gas burner cars. We really want this Toyota franchise." So my grandfather called this guy back, and he's like, "Hey, Bill, come on. I need this. I need this Toyota dealership. My kids really want it, And he had that type of accent. And so my grandfather ended up working out where he got the Toyota franchise. Well, during this time, my understanding is that you had to buy so many as they came into the United States. You had to buy so many. Well, my grandfather didn't like them, so he bought them and he just stuck them on the back lot. He didn't do anything with them. He did not market them but he didn't want this other guy, his competitor, to have the franchise because his boys wanted it. Well, fast forward in the early 80s, there was a gas crisis here in the United States. I want to say it was a Cuba crisis or something like that, but the gas prices just went out the roof, and you were limited on the supply that you could get. Well, my grandfather had a whole lot full of Toyotas he'd been buying, so he just pushed his big cars back, his little cars up to the front, and that's really, boom, that's where we got in the Toyota business. So my grandfather's a Toyota dealer. Then as my Uncle Billy is oldest, my dad's the middle, and then Uncle Jimmy is the younger son, and then we got Aunt Gail as well. Billy, Dad, and Jimmy all became Toyota dealers. I think Aunt Gail, had always been in the car business, but her husband, Cranston Scott, he has always I'm not sure if he's ever owned a dealership, but he's always worked very high up as like running other people's dealerships. So he's like the number one guy in the dealership. And so our whole family has that bloodline of being in the car business.
Yeah. Really cool entrepreneur story, because it just dates so far back.
Yeah.
He's scrappy with it, and you have to be scrappy as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And, for the longest time, Uncle Jimmy was the youngest Toyota dealer ever awarded a franchise because of my family's history with Toyota. He was the youngest dealer ever awarded a franchise. And then my understanding also is before he sold out and got completely out, is that Toyota has certain rules and regulations and training that they come in and do to make sure that your team is selling the way they want. And my understanding is they did not mess with Uncle Jimmy's team because Uncle Jimmy, he just knew how to do it.
Yeah. Wasn't there like a Chick-fil-A or something in his Toyota place, or you could at least you could go have a full on meal?
No, that's Uncle Billy. Uncle Billy was Billy built, that was I think that's in Tuscaloosa maybe. Okay. But he built a new Toyota dealership that was just absolutely mammoth. I mean, I've only seen pictures of it, but it's got coffee shops. I think it's got a little eatery in there. I'm not sure if it's Chick-fil-A, but it's massive. But Uncle Jimmy, understanding is with both of them actually, but and Dad, their top guys stayed with them for years and years and years. One of the stories with Uncle Jimmy, and then we can get off this topic, is that my understanding is that the guy that ended up being part owners of that Toyota dealership with Uncle Jimmy is started off as a customer, and then came in and like started off working in the shop. And then after working in the shop, he moved him to the floor. After the floor, he moved him to bookkeeping. After bookkeeping, he did the detailing. I mean, he just like worked in every little department, and then eventually got to the point where Uncle Jimmy wanted to take in a partner and have more free time. And he offered this guy that started off as a customer all the way through the ranks a chance to own part of that dealership with him, and took him to the bank, helped him get the loan. And then it gave Uncle Jimmy more free time, and this guy was in charge. But my family's always been about raising people up and through the ranks, because, even with me, with my businesses, I'm not afraid to ask anybody to do anything, because I tell them it's not something I haven't done myself. I've done this myself, so I'm not asking you to do anything I haven't done. If it's clean a toilet, it's clean a toilet. If it's, if it's detail a car, when I own my used car dealership, it's detail the car, because when you're small and you're scrappy like I was starting off, it was all hands on deck. Everybody's job is to make the business succeed.
Yeah. So let's kind of go back to you, and that you started a car business. You started a used car business.
So my dad sold his Toyota dealership and got into real estate and development and whatnot. His two top guys went out and started used car dealerships, buy here, pay here dealerships. And my brother is 4 years older than I, so he ended up working for my dad, is what I call his number one guy, Larry Harper. He ended up working for him, Champion Motors, I believe was his name. He ended up working there, getting a lot of knowledge and learning how to be in that world. And he'd moved to another dealership, another used car dealership, so he's getting more experience. And then when I came along and graduated from high school, I got a job working for Ray Wood. And Ray didn't want to hire me at first because he knew that he was basically training his competition. Eventually, he knew that Dad had the resources to help us get in business if that's what we decided to do. And he knew my brother was already in the used car business, worked for Larry and now working for another used car dealership. And so, but I just I was persistent. I would just go down there and just kept checking in with him. And then, he was a one-man operation, little bitty used car lot, one-man operation. And he would need title work taken to the tax office. So I would take the title work to the tax office, or he, wanted lunch, and I would run down and grab him lunch. I just kind of do anything because I needed a job and I didn't know what I was going to do, because I had horrible dyslexia, and I knew that I needed something that I could use my street smarts more than I could use book smarts. And he eventually gave me an opportunity, and I mean, it was such little pay, but I think it was like $150 a week guarantee, which, back then I guess was a decent money, but it really wasn't. I mean, it was cheap, but then I would get commission if I sold, how many cars I sold, but we probably only sold 8 or 10 cars a month at that little lot. But eventually me and Robbie got together, and we went and talked to Dad, and we said, we think we want to go in business together. Do you think you could help us? And Dad basically said, that's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for y'all to tell me that y'all are ready. So we were young. We didn't have any credit. I think when we started our own used car business, I think I was 23, which would have put Robbie at 27, but we didn't have any credit. So Dad co-signed with us on a loan. It was a $200,000 line of credit, and he basically became our partner. So it was the three of us, equal partners. Dad's role in that was providing the funding, and he let us know very upfront and very directly that if we didn't make a go at it, if it failed, that we would pay back every bit of that $200,000. And that was in 1996, and that was just me and Robbie getting in there, grinding it out. We got in at a good time as far as the time between, now it would, well, in 2012, when I started over down here, a minimum to get the same business up off the ground take you $1 million. So to be able to start with 200,000, that was pretty good. But we grew that business from just the two of us to we had about 15 employees combined between the used car lot and the mechanic shop that kind of worked. They were separate entities, but they worked as one. We had about 15 employees. We had about $15 million on the books and over 1,500 clients.
Wow. So
paying us about $350 a month each. It was actually on biweekly payments, so it was $175 every 2 weeks. You can do the math at $1,500 at $175 every 2 weeks. That we were doing, we were doing really well for ourselves for sure.
So I guess what does the math lay out? Because you said like with the small car lot, like it was 8 to 10 cars, and you said that was kind of a little amount. How many cars were you selling a month?
Well, the thing with in the sale number is important, but we were doing buy here, pay here. So the main thing is you want to get customers on the books, paying you every month, and you wanted to make sure you kept those customers on the books, paying you every month. And in the used car business and in the buy here, pay here world, that is like the lower tier of cars. So those cars had a lot more issues with them. Plus, our customer base also didn't have a lot of disposable money, so they weren't taking care of their cars. So their cars were, when they developed little issues, instead of taking care of that little issue so it doesn't become a big issue, they didn't have the money to do it. So then it would create a bigger issue, and then next thing you know, they would quit paying. You would end up repossessing the car. Now the car's got, a big repair because they just drove it while it was messed up and they didn't do any maintenance on it. And that's a bad position to be in. And a lot of buy here, pay here car dealerships, they like repossessing cars because they consider it free inventory. We operated just the difference. So what we did is we've recognized that our client base, they are a lifeline of our business. So we treated them like family. We wanted to take care of them. So we put 24-month, 24,000 mile warranties on all the cars. Thus, that's why we needed to have a mechanic shop. Things that weren't covered under warranty, we would work with them. Let's say it was, I'm just making this up because I can't remember what the warranty covered, but let's say it was the radiator and it was a $300 repair. Well, our customers are living paycheck to paycheck. They didn't have $300 extra to throw at a repair, and they didn't have credit cards to be able to get further in debt that way. So we would say, hey, this coming Friday, can you pay me $50? 2 weeks from then, can you pay me $50 more? And we'd work out that $300 repair over a 6-month period for them to help keep them in the car, which was a good thing for them, but is also good for us because it kept those monthly payments coming in. And our average payment through the life of our business, it grew from $225 to $250 up to about $350 to $400 range. But we were also carrying a much more expensive car. It got to the point in the car business where, when me and my brother first started off, we were buying $1,500 cars, and you take a $500, $600, $700, $800 down payment, and then you start payments. You're out of the car is the way that it's called. You're out of that car, say, in 3 to 6 months. That doesn't mean that it's all profit because you didn't get paid anything for your overhead, your rent, your insurance, your line of credit at the bank, our payroll. Nothing, none of that was paid yet. So, on a 24-month finance gig, you might be out of the car in the first 3 to 6 months. And then the rest of it was paying the bills at the car dealership. Well, it got to the point where we were buying, $7,500 cars, taking $700 or $800 down. So now you're in that car for, 12 to 18 months before you get your money back, depending on how the deal was structured. Because a lot of times when I say $700 down, it might be $700 down today, and then they would get a tax refund check 30 days from then and put $1,500 more with it, but we would release the vehicle. They would be out driving and getting what they needed to do for their family for a lower down payment. But you're putting a lot of risk out on the street. And that's why it ended up getting to be, we had a bunch of floods. We had a bunch of just government rules where they were taking older cars off the market, smashing them, and like you couldn't, they wanted them gone. So because of that, they were hurting the lower class individual. And you take a flood in Georgia area. We had 2 in our area, in Dougherty County area, but it takes a ton of cars off the market, and then it's hard to replace those older cars when the government is making people crush the older ones. So anyways, it just gets you to the point where it takes $1 million to do the same thing it took you to do too. I forgot the original part of that question.
No, that's okay. I think that was really interesting to get that perspective, because I think something that I oftentimes, like growing up, I would hear like, I guess when we were around the time for me buying a car, a lot of my friends would be like, yeah, my dad says those car salesmen are just like, they try and, just use and abuse the situation. And I was like, well, my dad was a car salesman. I was like, wait.
Well, there are a lot of guys out there that don't care about their customers. You know, but they're also salesmen.
Yeah.
They're trying to make a sale. They're trying to talk you into a payment that maybe you're not comfortable with, or get you to buy an extra product that you just don't really understand because it pads their commission. You know, so there is that out there, but there's also a lot of great guys out there that are trying to do the right thing by their customer base. And those are the guys that are going to be in it for long term. You know, we did free oil changes for life. We also had a program where we would give gas certificates if they just made their payment on time instead of even 1 day late. So it would help them establish smart credit-wise building, because 1 day is not a big deal to a lot of people, but you want to establish with a customer base that was not taught how to handle their finances, how to establish that in their life so they don't have the heartache that repossessions happen and late fees. You know, after I think 10 days, well, on a bi-weekly, after 5 days of a late fee, well, if you had a payment of $175 and after 5 days, then now all of a sudden that's like $183.75. That may not sound like a lot, but you do that twice a month. That's extra like $15 a month that they're paying in late fees. You stretch that out over the course of a year. Now, a lot of guys like that late fee, but because it is extra money and people look at it, hey, that's extra money that, you know, we didn't have to work for. For me, I was wanting to help teach and train and mentor my customer base on how to pay on time, reward them for paying on time with free gas vouchers. So we just did things like that. We did things a lot different. We had Fridays. Some Fridays we'd have Mr. Robert out there washing people's cars as they come up. If they had the time, he would get out there and wash the outside of their car for them, just as a thank you. You know?
No, that's incredible. So you had that business for, I guess,
from 96 to 2012 is when I sold out and we moved here.
And then what happened when we moved here?
Well, so one of the reasons why we moved here is because, do I need to get in that?
We kind of talked about it a little bit in the first episode.
So what happened here is that I took a 7-figure buyout from the car lot, and then I took really about a 7-figure buyout from our rental property, but the rental property side was in paid for rental property. So I took paid for rental property. We still have some duplexes today that are paid for, but I got the check from the car lot in 2 different checks, and I still have money owed to me. That's a different story. We can talk about it at a different time. But I got a check, you know, maybe $500,000 or so, and then the next check was coming, you know, in like the next 6 or 12 months. Well, that was slowed on me. So I knew that I needed $1 million to be able to start a used car lot here. So it just took forever to get my money to be able to go do it. You know, it took over like a year to be able to get my money to go do that. So I went to the bank thinking, hey, I've got 20 years experience. I grew a car business from me and my brother to 15 employees, you know, and 1,500 customers, you know, pulling in all this capital. Surely I can go down and I used to borrow money like it was very easy. We wanted to buy a lake house. We just tell the bank we want to buy a lake house. We buy it. Yeah. Beach house, buy it. Boat, we buy it, you know. So I kind of thought that would just kind of follow me down here, and it did not. So when I got down here, I went to the banks, and the banks wouldn't loan me any money. They said, you're a new entity. We don't know anything about you. And so I tried to do a used car lot underfunded. So I took $500,000 and put into this used car lot in Fort Walton that I started, and it failed. I didn't have enough capital. So I tried to do a hybrid method, which was using financial companies that were above buy here, pay here, but not quite bank and credit union worthy customers. They were kind of in between that gap there, and tried to do that hybrid. And that was very stressful on me, very difficult. I remember after the first sale we had done, it was me and a guy that lived in Georgia, a friend of mine. He moved down. He was actually working for me at Landmark Auto Sales, Uncle Mike. He come down and he was the salesman here. But after the sale that evening of our first deal through this finance company, the next day I had a panic attack and thought I was having a heart attack and had to go to the emergency room. I walked to it. It was just a few doors down, emergency clinic, and come to find out I was having a panic attack because of the amount of stress that I was under just trying to do the paperwork for it was just because of my dyslexia and because it was just such a new system, and I was under a tremendous amount of stress. But anyways, Mike moves back to Georgia after, I don't know, not even quite a year of being open. And then I started, shutting down the operation, and took a huge toll on me financially and mentally. Not just losing the car lot down here took a huge toll on me because I lost a lot of money in that, but living down here, not making a living. I wasn't making any money.
It's really expensive here.
Yeah, it's very expensive. We live in a resort town down in Destin, Florida. We live in a resort town, and we actually lived on a resort when we moved here. I was uprooting my family from a very nice, comfortable, cush situation in Georgia. We lived in a 4,800 square foot house on an acre lot with 1,200 square foot outdoor covered outdoor living, swimming pool, outdoor kitchen. We had the works. So when we moved here, I wanted to put my family in a safe environment, in an environment that we would enjoy. So we moved into Sandestin, and so the money was just disappearing like this. I was still living like we were making a lot of money, and we weren't making any money. So by the time a year and a half passed, by the time I finally get my second check from my brother, which wasn't a full check, but I got that second check, I felt like I had enough to try to get this thing going with $500,000, still have some money in the bank to live, for us. But I just made a bunch of wrong decisions. And a lot of those decisions, I'm here to tell you guys, is I made them out of the emotional side of my brain. I was not using logic. I did not have a good plan lined up when we moved here. I was basically trying to run away from depression, and I was trying to distance myself from my brother, and being unequally yoked with him in business, and being unequally yoked with him for so long. Dad was our mediator. He was the one that could get in there and kind of keep us from killing each other. And then when Dad died, the unequally yoked part of us, really the divide was just so huge between who I am as a person and who my brother was as a person. So it just really took its toll. And so I used my emotional side when we moved here, and that was not a wise decision. And it almost killed me. It almost broke us. I mean, it was a difficult time of our life.
Yeah, I mean, I was very shielded from it, so I didn't realize what all was going on. But I do remember, the car lot shutting down. And then I remember Mom coming to you one day and telling you that one of our clients, because we had a cleaning company that we had my mom had started with a friend. And so I joined in and started cleaning as well. But with that being said, one of the guys was like, I just wish I had someone trustworthy enough to come clean the exterior of my house. And I feel like that was like one day. And then the second day, I felt like you were like out cleaning a house.
That's exactly how it happened. My whole life since I was, 20, I was working for another guy at 20, but I worked for him probably 3 or 4 years at Castle Auto Sales before me and Robbie started Landmark Auto Sales. So from my 20s until, from 92, 93, when I graduated high school, started working for Ray, all the way to 2012, all I knew was used car business and real estate. So when I moved down here and the used car lot didn't work out, I was trying to figure out what this community needed, and I just didn't know what to do. And Mom talking to those clients, and I think there was multiple clients saying we need somebody reliable to show up and do what y'all do on the outside of our house. And Mom came home and was like, hey, you should get into cleaning homes or whatever. And at the time, I had met a guy that I was doing some business with when I had the car lot here in Fort Walton. We were exporting semis over to where were we exporting semis to? Anyways, we're exporting semis overseas, and from his home country, and I was still making a decent amount of money doing that. But then they had a presidency change over there, and Panama is where it was.
His name was Panama, right? Or
yeah,
was
we
that
called
just
him
what
Panama.
we called him? Okay,
we called him Panama. He was from Panama. I can't believe I couldn't remember that. But so there was a presidency change or something over there going on with their government, and all exports stopped. I had trucks over there, I had trucks over here, couldn't sell any of them, and had to get those things gone. but I wasn't pushing myself to get into the cleaning business. My plan was I was going to go clean people's windows. I was bored. I was bored half to death because I was the money man in this operation, and that guy was doing all the work of buying the semis and getting them overseas and whatnot. And I was collecting a check from my investment. But so I was going to start cleaning windows, get outside, do some things. And then when that happened, I was like, holy crap, I need to really get after this. So ended up really getting into pressure washing serious, and I had no idea you could make a living at it. I had no idea that you could make a living at this. I thought that it was just guys kind of making side hustle money and whatnot, but you can definitely make a living at it.
Yeah. Tell them about our first. Like, you cleaned the exterior, I cleaned the interior.
Yeah, so we had a friend of ours that we met down here. He flipped houses. He would buy houses and get them up and ready and flip them. And so Pace was very young still. How old are you?
I was like 14. Yeah.
She was 14, but she wanted to be homeschooled pretty much her entire life. She never really got along with her peer group, so she got along with older people. So she never really enjoyed school. And so one day I was like, look, present to me and your mom why you believe homeschool is the right path for you. She did this whole presentation, slideshow, whole 9 yards, and she convinced me. And I didn't think she was going to be able to convince me, but she did. And she went to homeschool, which was an online type school. She had teachers and stuff, but it was an online classes. But she could get her work done so fast that she wanted to be kind of like I was. Most kids and most people are looking at, like when they graduate from high school, they're looking back at their glory days in high school. I'm looking 10 years ahead. I'm 10 years ahead from right now. Right. I'm never looking at right now or the past, really. I'm looking forward. Well, Pace kind of the same way. So Pace got out and she started working with her mom, making pretty good money, working with her mom in the cleaning business. Well, our friend that bought this house, he's like, hey, I need it cleaned on the inside and cleaned on the outside. So Pace's like, I'll clean the inside. And I'm like, I'll clean the outside. So this was before I really got into it. It's like one of our first houses. Yeah. I went and bought a pressure washer down at Lowe's. I went and got our stuff. I didn't know anything about anything. And we got down there, and it took me, I think, 3 days to clean this house that now, with the right equipment, the right knowledge, I can clean that same house in probably an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
I remember you being on one side of the house for like ever.
Oh yeah, I didn't know anything about using a chemical to break down.
And
the
that house, the interior was so disgusting.
Pace was burning up inside. I was burning up outside.
I'm pretty sure we sat in the car and both cried. I'm like, oh my God.
We were both having heat strokes. It was so hot. It was like in the middle of August or something. So she'd have to come out from the inside of the house. She couldn't open the windows because I was outside pressure washing. She'd have to come out and sit in the car. I'd have to get down off the ladder and go sit in the car. So anyway, but that was a good learning experience.
Yeah.
People look at that, but I knew right then there was no way I could make a living doing what we were doing like that, and that I needed to educate myself. Mm-hmm. So, I found conventions to go to. I ended up connecting with mentors. I ended up taking online classes. I did all kind of stuff to get very educated in this field. And now, like I say, we can go clean that house. I can go clean it probably in 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours. That would take, I think it took me 3 days.
Yeah, I think it did.
Yeah.
And then, from there, we still have that business and it's thriving. And then from there, we've done a lot of different things, dabbled in a lot, learned a lot. And now with Barkley Capital, would you like to explain kind of like what that is?
Yeah, so you can see XRP here. What XRP is it's an investment that we got into as a family during the COVID, right after the COVID time period. I was looking into different avenues of investing, and what XRP is it's a cryptocurrency, but it is a utility currency, which means that it has real world purpose, real world solve. So what it does is it exchanges anything of value into anything of value for a fraction of a penny in a fraction of a minute or a second. Mm-hmm. It's so fast, like. It within 3 to 5 seconds it transacts. So this is how you got to think of it, and it's used for cross-border remittances. So if you had a ruble and I had the United States dollar, and this person over here had a yen. You could send me your ruble, but before it got to me, it would come through an XRP and come out the other side as a US dollar. And I could turn around and send my US dollar out to this guy over here that had the yen, and it would turn into yen all that quick for very small transaction fees. And so I realized that our world is going to a digital currency world. So I realized that COVID was the perfect setup. They wanted to test the system to see if there's a saying that says, don't ever let a crisis go to waste. That's what the powers that be always say. So they took the crisis of COVID and they ended up forcing us into a digital world with how digital currency is used today, which is a credit card or debit card. If you remember, you go into a curb store and, oh, we don't have change or we don't have cash. It forced everybody to start using their debit cards and credit cards. That was their testing ground to see if they could force the population into a digital currency. The thing about debit cards and credit cards is it's not settled immediately. A credit card, takes a while. A debit card takes a while. And money is actually called currency. It's because it's supposed to be current. It's supposed to be fluid. It's supposed to be moving. And you don't want it to ever be sitting stagnant because that creates a liquidity issue worldwide. So anyways, I found XRP and we started investing into XRP. And I believe XRP is going to do some really powerful things in this new economy that we're going into. So once we got into that, I started thinking about, hey, we've got to figure out what we're going to be doing with all the profits from our investments into XRP. We also have some other digital currencies, but that's the main one. So, I had background. We owned about 50 doors at one time, me and my brother. Like I said, I still own some duplexes today. So being in the real estate world has always been something that's been a part of me. So I wanted to get back into that world, but I'd been a distance from actively buying and selling for so long that I needed to start educating myself in it again. And I knew right off the bat that single family homes were just going to be a slow grind, and I didn't want to get into single family home investing. So I took Grant Cardone. He has a 3-day online course that you can take. I took his course about learning about multifamily, and he teaches how to evaluate deals and whatnot to see if you're investing into a good deal or not. And then I started listening to different podcasts. I started reading different books, and I started just diving into the multifamily investing. So what we do at Barkley Capital, which was your question, is that we invest into multifamily apartment complexes with other investors. It's called a syndication. But you can be a LP, which is a limited partner, or you can be a GP, which is a general partner. Originally, I thought that we would just be limited partners investing in with somebody like Grant Cardone, that we would be investing our money when XRP rised up and our other cryptos rised up and we were taking profits. We wanted to put that money to work. So I thought I'd be investing with somebody like Grant, but something came across one of my news feeds, and it was a multifamily mindset, and they were doing a free little event in Panama City. So we all packed up, the family packed up. We went to this free event. It was like a 2-hour little event where they kind of give you the rundown of how they operate and how they do things. And we were all very intrigued. So we signed up for a 3-day event in Tallahassee, following month or whatever. It was a paid event. We went there to learn more in depth. And at that event, we decided as a family that this is the route that we were going to take. But the thing that about it is all along, I thought we were just going to be limited partners in a deal, but multifamily mindset, what they taught is that we could form a business, Barkley Capital. We can invite investors in on deals, and we can invest through a syndication into multifamily apartment complexes, and we could help be in charge and in control of that property. So what we do is we partner with other operators in the multifamily mindset network. We partner with them, and then we bring our investment pools together to go achieve what we're after, which is buying multifamily apartment complexes. Our general partners which would, or what we are. The split is like we get 30% of the ownership, and the limited partners, which are the investor side, they'll actually get 70%. We will be investing in the limited side and in the general partner side. And the way that I kind of saw this was, a lot of people don't have the knowledge. A lot of people will not take the time to deep dive. I mean, we've spent over $30,000 just in our education in this, in deep diving and really learning the ins and outs, and starting our connections with other operators, and making sure that we're networking with the right people that have the type of experience that we're looking for. We were doing this selfishly for ourselves to invest, and then I'm like, look, these homeowners, our client base with Outdoor Extreme Clean, they are the ones that help put us in a position to even be here by entrusting us with doing their work at their house. So I'm like, hey, we can not only be limited partners, we can be general partners, and we can offer this to our client base who have entrusted us for over a decade. It's kind of our way of giving back to them. So we're going to offer our services of educating them in the multifamily real estate world and others. I mean, if you're interested, we'd love to connect with y'all, but you've got to be accredited, which means you either got to, as an individual, you got to earn $200,000 a year for the last 2 years with expectations of it being a continual, or if you're married, you got to earn $300,000 a year, 2 years, expecting it to continue, or you've got to have over $1 million in assets outside of your personal home. And then the other aspect is like a Series 7 license, and we're not looking for that. I'm not saying we're not looking for it. It's just that most people that have a 7 Series investment license is going to be different than what we're really targeting. You're not supposed to pick up everything I'm saying right now, but you are supposed to pick up a nugget. And you take that nugget and you put it in the back of your mind, and you hold on to it until you're ready to implement it. But if you think that nugget's going to come alive miraculously on its own, that's not how it works. You have to be digging for nuggets. These guys back in the olden days that were nugget, meaning like a gold nugget, they were out there with their picks and shovels, and they were digging, and they were shifting through, and they weren't just walking across open ground and, oh, look, there's a nugget, picking it up. That's not how it works. That's not how it works in our world either. You have to be digging for nuggets. So just with that real quick, the XRP thing, how I found XRP is back in 2000, probably
12-ish.
2010 to 2012 time frame. I would DVR, which is a recording device.
Yeah, what's that?
Y'all don't.
No.
Yeah, so it's a recording device
I remember it from a long
that
time
we
ago.
we could record our TV shows that we like to watch, and you could watch at a later time. Well, Glenn Beck, he was a Fox News contributor, and he had his own little show. Now he's got his own thing on YouTube, but he would have a 30-minute segment at like 5:30 to 6. So I didn't get off work until 6, so I didn't get home till like 6:30. And I had, we had a young family, but I'd ask Mama, like, look, I need 30 minutes when I get home, because that was like the only time I had to nugget hunt, because I was nugget hunting, I guess, at work all the time, but it was a different type of nugget hunting. It wasn't investing and learning about world events and stuff. But Glenn was talking about a great reset, that a great reset was coming, and that the powers that be are planning this. And if you dive into that, you can see that we're in the middle of this great reset right now. That is part of the digital currency era and the digital world that we're moving into, and the AI and all of that. All this is part of this great reset that Glenn was talking about back in 2010, 2012 time frame. Well, he was talking about a one world currency. Well, that stuck out to me because a one world currency is biblical. If you go into the Bible and you read, I think it's in Revelations and in other parts of the book, it talks about a one world currency in the end times. Well, that stuck with me. So it was a nugget that I put in the back of my head. Fast forward, and I come up to learn about XRP. Now, XRP is not a one world currency, but what it is a bridge currency. Back then, I couldn't understand how the whole world could operate on one world currency. It just didn't make sense. But the technology wasn't developed back then. You fast forward, and you got the internet, and you've got just how everything works today, AI and everything. I can see how it could work. But XRP is a bridge currency that exchanges anything of value into anything else of value. So it changes money at a fraction of a cent like this, and it goes into the other currency that you're looking at. So when I came across this, I was like, holy cow. I pulled the nugget from the back of my head from 12 years ago, listening to Glenn Beck, and put the two pieces of the puzzle together. And that's when my eyes opened. It's like, wait a minute, we are going through a reset right now. That's when I started diving deep. That's when I got, like this book right here, The Truth About COVID-19, Exposing the Great Reset, Lockdown, Vaccination Passports, and the New Normal. This book and books like that, we'll put that back in there, are books that helped me dive deep into what I felt like was happening. And it just reassured me that the nugget that I picked up from Glenn 12 years ago was a nugget I needed to put in place. And I truly 110% believe that God put XRP right in my lap to be able to take this, get my family and friends and anybody willing to listen and do their own research, dig in deep. They can learn about it themselves and they can get invested in it, because I truly believe it's going to be part of the rails of our new financial system.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I know you do, because
Yes.
you've invested your own hard-earned money into it.
I have.
And that's the cool thing also, is that at being a dad and a mentor to my kids, is that they're not just passively watching this. They both work with me inside of Outdoor Extreme Clean. They'll be part owners in that at the end of 2025. They both have their own hard-earned money invested into XRP and some other cryptocurrencies that are part of the financial system, part of the community of ISO 222 token coins. Those coins are designed to be, so ISO 222 is an international standard of like communication with the banks. So all the banks have got to have this type of computer software installed and utilizing it, so all the banks can communicate in the same coding language, basically, is the way I understand it. So these other cryptocurrencies that we're invested in, like XLM and HBAR, and those are cryptocurrencies that are part of this. So all of the cryptocurrencies that we invest in are part of the rail system that we're going to be using as a world to transact money. I forgot where I was going with that, but I kind of got sidetracked.
No, that's really interesting. And I think if it doesn't...
I'm sorry. But what I was saying is that y'all are actively investing
Right.
your own hard-earned money into these cryptos. Y'all are actively learning, like we're partners in Barkley Capital. Our last name is Barkley. Her last name is Strickland. So it's Bark and then the land on Strickland. So that's how we came up with Barkley Capital. So, but we're learning all this together. We're doing it together. So, my kids are going to be, she's 25, my son's 22. In 5 to 10 years, they are going to be absolute top tier experts in these fields of influence that we're invested in. And that just excites me as a dad and as a mentor to see that my kids are not just sitting on the sideline. They are nugget hunting. They are digging deep. They are learning. Now they have somebody like me that is encouraging that, and some of you may not have that, but let me be that person for you. Let me help encourage you to get out of your comfort zone, to shut down the bitch voice, to listen to your warrior voice, and get after it. Get after it. We only got one life. And we better make it count. Eminem says, in his famous song, he has a verse in there that's like, we got one life and you better make it count. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make our life count by growing, learning, and executing, and not looking back.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, if some of this doesn't make full sense, he actually has a lot of information, videos, things like that you've gone through and that you'll oftentimes share with people. So what I can do is I can take what he has to share and I can put it in an email. So
Sure,
and, yeah. we can make sure that gets out to y'all. So go sign up to our email newsletter.
We want to provide nuggets to you. So if you sign up for a little email, we'll send you short, sweet, not a bunch of, I'm not a reader, so I don't want you to have to read to get the information. We're going to make it as short, sweet as we possibly can, but to give you nuggets that you can start putting in the back of your mind, or you may be ready to implement them right now. But either way, you'll have the nuggets of truth and knowledge from somebody that's a little farther along the line than you. That's what I've always done my entire life. I've taken people that are farther down the line than me, and I've borrowed their knowledge base to help me accelerate where we want to go in life. And we want to be that for you. So yeah, just sign up for the email and let's get you some nuggets of truth out there, and let's go from there.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you next week.